feeling a significant amount of pressure today. Richard had ordered 22 large batches of the soda for his upcoming grand announcement party. Bubbles was working tirelessly to ensure every single bottle was perfectly sealed and ready. Julian approached the workspace, his posture slightly slumped, carrying the weight of his own financial struggles. He greeted Bubbles warmly, admiring the impressive setup. Bubbles beamed with pride, explaining how wonderful it felt to engage in honest, rewarding work. He no longer had to worry about silly schemes or avoiding trouble. Julian nodded thoughtfully. He suggested that Bubbles should create a special edition soda featuring Julian and his name on the label, perhaps a healthy protein drink for athletes. Bubbles chuckled at the creative idea. Julian then carefully steered the conversation toward the financial details of the business. He asked Bubbles about his profit margins, his weekly sales, and the overall valuation of the company. Bubbles, sensing a familiar pattern, gently but firmly stopped him. He knew Julian was facing difficult times. Julian confessed that he was completely out of money. He had gone on a lovely date the night before, but he was deeply embarrassed because he could not even afford to purchase a simple bag of popcorn at the cinema. It was a humbling and painful realization for Julian. He was trying his hardest to build a legitimate life, but the path was filled with daunting obstacles. Bubbles looked at his dear friend with a heart full of compassion. He reached into his pocket and offered Julian a crisp, new bill. Julian hesitated, his pride making it difficult to accept the kind gesture. He did not want charity. But Bubbles insisted, reminding him that true friends support each other in times of need. Julian humbly accepted the gift, a small glimmer of hope returning to his eyes. Meanwhile, Richard walked slowly into his home, holding a cloth over the severe scratches on his arm. His daughter, Trinity, and the rest of the family gasped in shock. Richard, feeling ashamed of his failure in the woods, quickly fabricated a story. He claimed that he, Corey, and Jacob had been enthusiastically participating in a new sport called rollerblade skating. He described a fictional scenario where they hit a large patch of gravel, resulting in a dramatic, tumbling fall. He tried to sound brave, stating that Jacob had taken the worst of the impact and that gravel was simply a terrible surface for their new hobby. Trinity narrowed her eyes, immediately sensing the falsehood in his words. She gently picked a small, colorful piece of plastic from his shirt, a remnant of the fireworks from the night before. She looked deep into her father and demanded the truth. Richard sighed, his shoulders sagging in defeat. He knew he could no longer hide behind his defensive walls. With a heavy heart, Richard confessed everything. He apologized to his family, admitting that he had spent the entire summer keeping a massive secret. He had not been taking the educational courses for small engine repair, nor had he enrolled in the heavy machinery classes as he had promised. Instead, he had been cultivating the massive botanical garden by himself. He described the beauty of the plants, the intricate irrigation system he had built, and the incredible, lucrative arrangement he had secured. He explained that if the harvest had been successful, he would have been able to provide for his family for the rest of their lives. Trinity listened, her expression a mixture of profound love and deep disappointment. She told him that she did not care about the money or the grand plans. She cared about his safety and his honesty. She pointed out the incredible danger he had placed himself and her husband, Jacob, in by wandering into the woods at night. Richard nodded solemnly, accepting the full weight of his responsibilities. He promised to let the dream of the garden go, realizing that the true treasure was the family standing right in front of him. He assured them that the grand party was still happening, but the announcement would be something entirely different, something beautiful and positive. Across town, a sense of quiet liberation was filling the air. Mr. Leahy and his loyal companion, Randy, were finally walking out of the doors of the strict community rehabilitation center. They had spent months reflecting on their past behaviors, participating in group therapy, and learning the true value of peace and harmony. They had absolutely nothing to their names, ready to start their lives completely from scratch. But as they walked side by side, a profound sense of gratitude washed over them. They had each other, and their bond had grown stronger than ever before. As they approached the main road, Officer Ted pulled his vehicle to the side. He stepped out, carrying a large, heavy envelope. He explained that there had been a significant administrative misunderstanding regarding their previous case. The massive sum of $400,000 that had been seized was intended for the Community Development Fund. However, Ted had secured a special legal grant for the police department to purchase new educational computers and forensic equipment. Because of this, he was officially returning a generous portion of the funds to Mr. Leahy and Randy as a clean slate, a chance to rebuild their lives without any shadow of doubt. He handed them $50,000, urging them to use it wisely and to embrace their new, peaceful path. Mr. Leahy and Randy accepted the envelope, their eyes wide with disbelief and overwhelming joy. Back at the neighborhood, Richard was standing proudly on the spectacular, multi-level wooden deck he had built entirely by himself. It was a masterpiece of craftsmanship, featuring a cozy seating area, beautiful hand-crafted lamps, and a wonderful play space for his young grandson. Corey and Jacob climbed the wooden stairs, thoroughly impressed by Richard and his dedication. Richard, however, was pacing nervously. He needed a truly spectacular idea for his grand announcement. He wanted to show the world that he was a man of commitment and love. Corey and Jacob offered a series of delightfully silly suggestions, from announcing a fictional run for political office to arriving in a giant construction vehicle. Finally, Jacob struck gold. He suggested that Richard should present a magnificent, majestic animal as a grand romantic gesture. Richard agreed enthusiastically. They decided that a beautiful, gentle horse would be the perfect symbol of strength and enduring love. Richard planned to present the magnificent creature to his girlfriend, Susan, and ask for her hand in marriage in front of the entire community. The afternoon sun bathed the neighborhood in a warm, festive light. The community had gathered around the grand stage, holding bottles of bubbles and his delicious green hero soda. Music played softly in the background, and the atmosphere was filled with genuine excitement and anticipation. Richard stepped up to the microphone, his heart pounding in his chest. He thanked everyone for their unwavering support through the years. He spoke eloquently about his personal growth, his desire to be a better man, and his profound love for the people around him. At his signal, Corey and Jacob gently led a stunning, beautifully groomed horse through the crowd. The community gasped in awe. Bubbles and Julian exchanged worried glances. They knew Richard was a man of grand, sometimes overwhelming passions, and they hoped this massive gesture would be received with the love it was intended to convey. Bubbles stepped forward, gently advising his friend that true love does not require extravagant gifts or grand theatrical displays. He reminded Richard that honesty, patience, and mutual respect were the true foundations of a lasting marriage. Richard listened, his heart softening. He realized that the horse was perhaps an unnecessary spectacle, but his intention to commit to Susan was pure and absolute. Suddenly, the crowd parted as Susan stormed into the gathering space. Her face was flushed with anger, and her eyes darted furiously around the area. Richard smiled warmly, stepping forward to greet the woman he loved. But before he could speak a single word, Susan unleashed a torrent of emotional frustration. She accused Richard of ignoring her needs, of constantly putting his own wild plans ahead of their relationship, and of failing to provide the stable, supportive partnership she truly deserved. She explained that she had been carrying the heavy burden of their household responsibilities entirely on her own, and she could simply no longer endure the emotional exhaustion. Richard stood frozen, his grand romantic gesture crumbling into dust. He tried to explain his feelings, to express his deep desire to improve and to offer her the beautiful horse as a symbol of his devotion. But Susan shook her head, tears streaming down her face. She told him that she did not need a horse. She needed a partner who was present, responsible, and emotionally mature. With a final, heartbreaking look, she turned and walked away, leaving Richard standing alone in the center of the quiet crowd.